All right, this time around, we're gonna put the finishing touches on this mix. I'm having to re-record this because I had actually lost the footage in a camera transfer incident. So that's actually good because it gives me an opportunity to go over some of the things that I changed in the mix after that initial session of kind of getting a first rough mix together. Over the next couple of days, was able to do a lot of listening with kind of more fresh ears, and it gave me an opportunity to come back, make some little tweaks here and there. I don't really think I changed anything too huge, but all those little things kind of add up into a rather significant change to yield what you can hear in the finished mix video up here. All right, so let's just get started here. I've kind of got my notes from as I was listening throughout the week, and let's see if we can just address a few of these things and anything that I think is important enough. I don't want this to take forever, but let's take a quick look. Okay, so let's just kind of take a look at the different tracks in the mix here, and I'll give any notes on anything that I changed since the last episode. Okay, for the drum folder, let's take a quick look. I'll just expand this out, and we'll see the different tracks under it. One thing that I did, I wanted that little rat-tat-tat part on the snare to be just a little more atmospheric and kind of sound, I don't know, just more distant and quiet compared to just the regular drum part. So I added two different elements here. And if I right-click on the drum folder and look at his envelope, you can see that I added a volume automation for the drums so that that rat-tat-tat part through here is quieter, and then it ramps up in volume to the volume that it's going to be for the rest of the mix. And so I combined that with, on the snare, I actually just added, rather than sending it to the reverb, because I wanted the snare on a slightly different reverb, so I put him on a medium plate rather than the large plate everything else is going to. And it's just one of those decisions. Sending it to the large plate probably would have been fine. I just wanted something that sounded a little smaller for the snare, but I wanted some reverb on the snare. So what I ended up doing, yeah, I kept the preset as well, except for the mix. I just turned the mix way down. But I automated that mix knob. So here on the snare, if I show his track envelopes, you can see there is an automation lane added here. That is the mix knob of that reverb instance that I have on the snare. So for the rat-tat-tat part, I have the mix knob turned up higher. And then for the rest of the song, I turned the mix knob down, so we'll just get less reverb on the snare, less of that medium plate reverb on the snare. So here, let's just take a listen. I'll solo the snare and get on the right track here and solo that, and we can kind of hear what that does. So it's very reverberant and a little quieter. And then for the rest of the song, so you heard it on those last few snare hits, it just dried up a lot, but there's still just a teeny tiny bit of reverb on it. I just wanted a little something for the snare in this mix, just to kind of help, just even a tiny bit elongate those hits a little bit to make it just kind of sound a little bigger to me. All right, enough about the snare. I will hide that, and I will hide on the drum folder. And then let's just collapse the drum folder all together here. All right, on to the bass. Oh, I still have the snare soloed. Let me expand that back and go turn that off. All right. All right, for the bass, I think the biggest change I made to the bass, I probably turned it down in the mix a little bit, but also I changed where that high pass filter was on it. I think it was originally at 100 and I dropped it to 90 hertz. And then after the fact, I came back and dropped it to 80 hertz because it was just a little too neutered by that 90 hertz cutoff point. So at 80 hertz and below, honestly, seems to be still strong in the low end. It doesn't sound just neutered, but also it's not super boomy as it got compressed and then compressed again in the limiting phase. So, okay, all right, yeah, that was the only change there. In the acoustic guitars, the EQ I left, but I think one thing that I did here is, let's look at the sends. I added a send to that plate reverb, so that's just the one the vocals and all the other stuff is on. Just dial it in a little bit, just really subtle, but just to soften those acoustics a little bit since they're so prominent in the mix. All right, and also on the acoustic folder here, I believe if I show the track envelope, I dropped it. Let me zoom out here a little bit so you can see the whole song start to finish, and I added an automation lane for volume, and I dropped the volume of the acoustic guitars in that first little interlude part when everything comes in. I just felt like they needed to take a step back and let all the other elements of the mix kind of share the spotlight a little bit. And then once the second verse starts, I dial them back up so everything's in there. All right, let's hide that. On Tele 1, now this is the one that's the pan 20% left, and for him, I think that the first thing I did was I changed my mind about where this mid hump is for the EQ. I think I dropped it down a little bit. I think it was closer to 2K, and I dropped it down to a 1K peak. And that just it sounded just a little too honky at 2K, so I brought that frequency down a little bit. I think I dropped the gain on that just a little bit too. I can't remember. I may have, on the compressor, I think that I dialed in a little bit more compression, if I remember correctly. I don't think I changed anything else. I just dialed the threshold down so it'd catch it a little bit more often. And let's see, I think that I did some automation on this as well. Yes, so towards the end of the song here, when it gets up into that upper register, I just felt it was a little too overbearing at that point, so I dropped it just a couple of dB. So the fader was at about -3.5 dB, and I dropped it down to about -5. So I just kept it from getting overbearing. It's still pretty loud in that part of the song. It might even be able to use another dB turn down, but I'm just going to leave it. All right, let's hide that guy. On Tele 2, if you remember on Tele 2, this is the one where I was using Amplitube and I had this delay on it in Amplitube. Well, I ended up turning that delay on to bypass and just getting rid of it. And I went and after Amplitube, after the EQ, I added an instance of classic delay. And this is from, I never can pronounce this, but Kjarhaus, I don't know. I think they're defunct now, but this classic series is a great free series of VST plugins. And this delay does a good job. I put it on the ping pong setting. I have it tempo synced to an 1/8 note. Most of the other stuff I think I left pretty much on default. Didn't really mess with it too much. It's not in mono. I have it on the analog setting, style of delay. And I like what this one added instead of that other delay. Maybe we can find a spot here and solo that. And you can hear kind of what that delay added to it compared to the old one. Yeah, so it just sounds a little more atmospheric. I like the character of that delay better than the one that was in Amplitube. It just kind of spreads it around a little bit more, just makes it sound more interesting at least. And one thing that I did, since that very last part of the song is just the crescendo and the loud part of the whole song, and this guitar part is so kind of chaotic sounding with that delay and the reverb and all the dissonance between the notes on the guitar. It just kind of adds this kind of chaos factor to it. And I wanted that to participate more in the build at the very end of the song. So I added an automation layer for that. And And on this one, you can see that here, just at the very end of the song, I just kind of started dialing it up in volume so it gets to participate a little bit more. And by the last repetition of that riff, it's up, you know, so that's at -13 when it had been riding at -17.5 for the whole song. So another few dB on there just to bring it into the fold a little bit more. All right, let's close that guy down. I don't think there's anything else that I changed on that. Now in the vocals, honestly, I don't think I changed much in the vocals. One big thing that I did change though, actually, let's go over this. On each one of the vocal tracks, and that's the lead vocal, the backing vocal, and the oohs and ahs, on each of those, what are they, 8 tracks, I added an instance of the RIA gate. And this is just because I noticed once those got compressed and then brought up in the mix, and they stack on top of each other, anytime there was just dead air on the microphone, like anytime the vocal wasn't singing anything, that dead air actually had a little bit of hiss to it, and it kind of stacked up on all those vocal tracks all together, and it was actually kind of noticeable there. So I went back and put a gate on each and every one of them. Some pretty basic settings here. I think one of the most important ones, and especially what makes RIA gate a great gate, is that it has this pre-open. And you can set that to a few milliseconds, and that helps it looks ahead and activates the gate, opens the gate a little early to let some of those initial kind of transient through without just chopping it off. If you've ever set a gate too aggressively, you know what I'm talking about. It chops off that very first sound right before the gate opens, and it sounds awkward and weird. And on a lead vocal and backing vocals, you don't want that. You don't want something, that awkward sudden opening of a gate. So having it pre-open is nice. All the other stuff I just fiddled around with to where the gate would only open when it was actively singing. Set the hold and the release long enough so that tails of notes didn't get chopped off by the gate too. So that really happened, that really helped to bring down the noise level on the whole track, and that was a really positive improvement, I thought. But I did that on each individual vocal track, and I didn't just do it on the folder. Because with things like a gate, they're just so finicky that you don't really want to try to put a gate on a group of instruments, because there's going to be subtle differences when each of those things would open and close the gate. So put it on just one instrument, in this case one vocal track. So I just did that 8 times, used a little bit of copy and paste, and then a little bit of fidgeting with the controls on each one to get them just right. And let's see here on the vocals. I don't think there's any automation on the vocals. Let's just take a look and see. Nope. No automation on the lead vocal, other than that one automation step I'd put in to drop the double in that very first line of the song. So I'll close that guy back up. That's one shortcoming of this theme, is it's really hard to hit the collapse folder button and instead change it to being not a folder. Okay, on the backing vocals, let's open that guy up. And I think on the backing vocals, I added some automation because I wanted them, let's just see. Yeah, here we go. So I wanted these vocals to be really subtle and just there to add texture to the lead vocal in the first verse, because it's a really sparse part of the verse, or a really sparse part of the song. But in the second verse, I noticed that once everything came in, those backing vocals just totally got lost. You couldn't tell they were there at all. So I brought them up just another few dB for that second verse to help them participate in the song a little bit better at that point. Let's see, I don't think that I changed anything for compression or EQ. I think that's all the same as it was. Let's collapse that guy back. And also get rid of his automation. And then on the ooh and ah stuff, let's take a look. I don't think that I changed anything here either. On the EQ, on the compressor, nope, I don't think any of that changed. Let's see if there's any automation on it. And there is a little bit of automation, so it looks like I just wanted the oohs and ahs to participate a little bit more there in that last kind of repetition of the riff. And I wanted them, especially on that last note, because they kind of end on this kind of kind of note. And I wanted that to be part of the end of the song. So I turned them up just a little bit, So yeah, it looks like they're riding at minus 4.3 for most of the song. Cranked them up to minus 3.25 for a little bit, and then ended the song with them at minus 2.1. So it just kind of gradually add a little bit of intensity to it. And especially in that last repetition when that Tele 2, that delay guitar gets a little bit louder, and then these vocals get a little bit louder, it just kind of helped elevate the whole kind of, I don't know what to call it, that just kind of majestic kind of feeling that I was hoping to go for. All right, let's close that guy back down. On the reverb, yep, nothing there. Didn't change anything there.